When it rains, it pours in Memphis, Tennessee. When it comes to the injury bug, the Memphis Grizzlies really continue to struggle with that. Numerous players out for numerous weeks. Marcus Smart, Luke Kennard, Xavier Tillman Sr. What is in the water in Memphis with these Grizzlies? Plus, Damichael Cole is back with us. We'll get his takeaways from the weekend of games. And we'll close out this episode being thankful before Dylan Brooks dominates our program for the Wednesday show. We'll talk about all that and more on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It's a tremendous Tuesday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. I am one of your hosts, Joe Mullinax of Bluff City Media, joined by my wonderful partner and co-host, Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. Make sure you're following him on X if you don't already do so at Damichael C. Follow me on X at Joe Mullinax. Between the two of us, you have a lot of years of Memphis Grizzlies coverage. You have a lot of written word. I know Damichael has a big feature coming out, all sorts of different articles over at the Commercial Appeal. Lots of great stuff between he and I, mostly him. By all means, make sure you're following along. You've come to the right place for Memphis Grizzlies content is the point. So whether you're an everydayer or whether this is your first time with us here on Locked On Grizzlies, welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so glad that you could join us. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you're checking us out on YouTube as well. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, as we are proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That is $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. Damichael, it's been a while. You were a busy man down at FedEx Forum on Sunday evening into Monday, covering that Grizzly Celtics game. And we're going to get your thoughts on not just that gritty moral victory. I don't know if you were able to fully hear my discussion of the idea of moral victories on the Monday show. Again, you're a busy man, but I kind of thought in professional sports, that's not really a thing. But if it was a thing, I feel like the Celtics game against the Grizzlies was a good moral victory. The big storming comeback against the San Antonio Spurs the night before, it felt like what has been few and far between for the Memphis Grizzlies this season, a good weekend. And we'll talk more about that later. We'll also do a Grizz Giving segment where we talk about things that we're thankful for. Spoiler alert, I'm thankful for you, Damichael Cole. You already do that.
Thankful for you too, Joe.
Yes,
I'm just as thankful for you, man.
Yes. Gosh. You said it back. For those
were you worried? Were you worried that I wasn't thankful for you?
Not that I was worried, but again, you're very busy. I'm less busy than you, especially now that my football season's over. I had a rough day on social media, which is, most days, if we're all being honest with each other. So, it's nice to hear that somebody, cares. It's good to know that.
I didn't see everything. I saw Parker's post, and I think is that what started the fire?
Yeah. I'm a very sensitive. I'm very sensitive. You know that, Damichael. You know that about me. I'm actually a very sensitive person, and it was a hard day. But you know what? You made it better just now. So thank you for that, partner. I can always count on you.
That's the least I can do. Yeah.
But let's take a hard left turn and go down a path that is less sunshine and rainbows than being grateful for one another and a solid weekend for Memphis. Another injury release, or an injury report, I should say, from the Memphis Grizzlies. Another one that doesn't sound particularly good. Luke Kennard out for a couple of weeks at least before he gets reevaluated. Xavier Tillman week to week. Obviously, Marcus Smart missing a lot of time. If you're doing the math at home, boys and girls, that puts us at 6 or 7 now projected rotation players for the Memphis Grizzlies that are not currently active for a variety of reasons. That makes what Desmond Bain, Jaren Jackson Jr., and those that are playing all the more impressive. Matt Moore at HP Basketball on X, he's one of the very best out there covering the NBA, at least in my opinion. I like Matt a lot, always have since I, have gotten to know him through doing this. He has a hot take, at least to me, it's a hot take. And I'm the king of hot takes, apparently, right?
Yeah.
Matt Moore talks about how injuries happen. You need to be ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
I agree to an extent. From when you look around the NBA, nobody is suffering as much as the Memphis Grizzlies right now when it comes to games lost from meaningful players that were going to be in the rotation for
Let me add something
being
there.
good. Please.
Yeah, because I agree, and I'll be brief with this because you look at the Warriors. Now when Steph Curry misses games, they have Chris Paul. That's kind of, addressing the issue to an extent. Now with Bradley Beal being out, the Suns still have Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, but they also have like Grayson Allen and Eric Gordon playing good basketball for them. So It's kind of, you have those type of guys. With Jamal Murray being out, you got Christian Braun who comes in off the bench, Reggie Jackson stepping up for Denver. So you got those type of pieces. But in Memphis, okay, Steven Adams goes down, you get Bismack Biyombo. Then Luke Kennard goes down, and you got this guy stepping up. Then Derrick Rose, then John Morant, and this guy. And it's like, okay, look, you can only fill in the pieces so much. And right now, I think the Grizzlies are just overstocked with, like, we've seen in the past, they've been able to, put a replacement starter in for Steven Adams and kind of, stay afloat. But now we're talking about, you're replacing Steven Adams replacement in terms of Brandon Clark to Xavier Tillman to Biyombo. And I mean, it's so much that there's only so much teams can overcome. And that's my point with saying, like, if you get past, with those teams that I just mentioned, if the Suns, if they were to lose, Grayson Allen or Eric Gordon, I think that'll be a big one, for them, because those are those fill-in pieces for them. Or if you go to the Warriors, if Chris Paul goes down, they're having the same point guard issues that they had in the Chris Paul days when Steph Curry used to go down.
Sure, absolutely. And there's only so many holes you can plug before the boat takes on water, right? And that's exactly where the Memphis Grizzlies currently are. How do you perceive that, this team is supposed to be young, right? Relatively young compared to other teams in the NBA. I know we won't mention any names, but the team has gone through some changes in terms of their medical staff, all that sort of stuff that you're probably more in tune with than I am. Is there blame to place? Again, we've had an episode recently where we talked like that. I don't know that this is the time or place for that angle, even though, I get very angry at times. Is this just a run of bad luck? Is this the Grizzlies not being prepared for the season? Because while injuries happen, and I think Matt and you are right to point that out, again, this is literally, take Ja out of the equation. You've got Marcus Smart, Derrick Rose, who is back, but again, he missed several games. You've got Luke Kennard. You have so many guys, Santi Aldama to start this, so many players that are not active or have missed several games for this team. You could make a starting roster or starting lineup of guys that aren't currently playing for the Grizzlies. So how do you respond to the idea? Again, it's hard to place blame with injuries, but why is it so different in Memphis compared to the rest of the league right now? Are we just going to chalk it up to bad luck?
I think some of it's bad luck. Some of it is bad luck, right? But Joe, I'm gonna read a quote to you and the rest of our viewers here, and I'll let you give your response to this. This was the day before we found out about the extent of Xavier Tillman Sr. and Luke Kennard injuries. And for those who don't know, at this point, both are recovering from left knee injuries. Xavier Tillman is classified as week to week, and now Luke Kennard will be reevaluated in 2 weeks. Now, we talked about it on the show. Luke Kennard was initially given a precautionary I think Taylor Jenkins used that word, and on the West Coast trip, he used precautionary and was classified as day-to-day. And Xavier Tillman had similar wording. But one day before, literally about 24 hours before the announcement came out, I asked Taylor Jenkins about Xavier Tillman Sr. in particular, because if you watch what happened with Xavier Tillman Sr., he had the left knee injury, then he came back for one game, then he missed the next 2 games. So I was like, is there more clarity that you could provide on that situation? And here's what he said, Joe. He said, just some knee soreness that crept in. Just trying to be cautious. I don't anticipate him playing tonight. This was Sunday's game. I don't anticipate him playing tonight. We have a couple days before our next game on Wednesday. He's pretty much day-to-day right now. So I'll go ahead real quick. What I'll say is him saying he's pretty much day-to-day right now, it feels like this is the message that's being conveyed to Taylor Jenkins from his medical staff. And that's what he's relaying to us, because if you're following along at this point, Luke Kennard, we saw day-to-day, reevaluated in 2 weeks. Xavier Tillman, day-to-day. I think Derrick Rose was at one point day-to-day, then moved to week. Marcus Smart, it was nothing too serious. And then boom, 3 to 5 weeks. So that's kind of been where we are. But yeah, Joe, so I just read it to you. And that was Taylor Jenkins' words literally 24 hours before the X news.
It seems like there's a disconnect. It goes all the way back to the Steven Adams situation back last season when he was like, oh, yeah, we're excited to get Steve-O back. Looking forward to getting him out on the court.
He playing 5-on-5.
Yeah, never happened, right? That never happened. Not just this season, but again, literally back in like February and March, we had Taylor Jenkins saying things like Adams was going to be back for last season, and that never occurred. So I don't know if there's a disconnect, a miscommunication, a broken line, whatever the case might be. But I think Memphis Grizzlies fans have a right to be frustrated that this is happening. Not that guys are getting hurt. Obviously players don't want to be injured, but it just seems unclear, right? From day to day, pardon the pun, it just doesn't seem like we have a good grasp of who is available and who is not outside of Ja Morant with his suspension. So it's hopeful for me that they eventually get healthy. We do know that this front office likes to be very precautious and very concerned about making sure soreness doesn't become something bigger. But again, no other team in the NBA is dealing with it to this scope and scale. And that is what's giving me reason.
Only
to
3
pause.
guys. Only 3 guys have played in every game for the Grizzlies up to this point.
Pretty crazy.
We know Jaren and Dennis. The third is David Roddy.
And again, Jaren Jackson Jr., if any of them were to have a reason to not play, Jaren's been playing basketball since August, right? He was there in FIBA. We're talking wear on the tires. He's played more basketball to this point than he has in a long time from August to November. So it's just a confusing thing, and hopefully we get more clarity as time goes on. We come back here on Locked On Grizzlies. We'll get some clarity on Damichael Cole's perspective on the weekend that was for the Memphis Grizzlies. Again, he was there in person for the Boston game, saw San Antonio game, and the rapid comeback, the last 6 quarters of Grizzlies basketball. Reasons for optimism. We'll talk about that from Damichael's perspective, since he wasn't with us on the Monday show when we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Score early and often this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Of course, you can go and use FanDuel for all your NBA needs, but the NFL season, of course, is in high gear. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's right, $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time than the present to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including things like spreads, player props, over-unders, the ever so popular single game parlay, and much, much more. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and grind through not just the NBA season, but the NFL season as well as the holidays approach with FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, Damichael talks his weekend thoughts on where the Memphis Grizzlies stand after a pretty impressive comeback and a staggeringly aggressive showing against the best team in the NBA and the Boston Celtics. We'll talk that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Stay with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, one of your hosts of this wonderful podcast, joined by my co-host, Damichael Cole. He writes over at the Commercial Appeal. Make sure that you're checking him out at Damichael C. He is the Memphis Grizzlies beat reporter for that publication. I am the Memphis Grizzlies columnist over at Bluff City Media. Between the two of us, you are in a great place to get great Memphis Grizzlies content. Hopefully you become an everydayer if you're not already one, and you like, subscribe, all those fun things to what we're doing here at Locked On Grizzlies. And friendly reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On like us, plus our national shows covering each and every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Damichael Cole, you had a chance over the weekend to take in the Grizzlies games, much like I did. A major difference on Sunday. You were there in Memphis at FedEx Forum, watching the Grizzlies fight valiantly in a losing effort to the Boston Celtics the night before. a 19-point, pretty tremendous comeback. I read all your work over at the Commercial Appeal. For the folks that don't, you're making a mistake. You need to make sure you're subscribing to the CA and checking out everything Damichael does. You didn't have a chance to be on Locked On Grizzlies on Monday, so the floor is yours, partner. What are some of your major takeaways? Because I talked all the Monday episode about it.
Yeah.
What are some of your major thoughts about the 1-1 weekend that was? It obviously could have been better, but it felt about as good as realistically could have been expected, considering how all these things are hitting the Grizzlies at once, especially with regard to their health.
Yeah, you remember we did the realistic point of view that time on Locked On Grizzlies when I asked you to kind of realistically predict how these next few games would go for the Grizzlies, and they went two out of three in these last three games when you factor in the Clippers game as well. So I think that's a good point. But not only that Boston game, I mean, it was a lot of people in Memphis basically were expecting to get beaten pretty badly. In the game. Like, a lot of people weren't giving the Grizzlies a chance. And if you've seen the Grizzlies over the last 3-4 years, that's kind of when they end up playing their best for some reason. Like, you don't give them a chance.
Because for the record, even if Memphis was full strength, a second game of a back-to-back, that's a game that Boston's probably favored in, even if Morant and Adams and Clark, all those guys were healthy or available. That still was going to be a tall task.
Exactly. Double-digit favorites in this case. So, the number one thing that stood out to me was the lineup change, and putting Santi at the three. I think you've talked about that before. A little bit. Maybe it was Parker.
I'm not a huge fan.
Yeah, your guy Parker's talked about it.
My boy Parker.
Yeah, but Santi at the three. I've heard the rumblings, and I've always been indifferent about it. It's like, hey, depends on who's available. I get the whole get your best five guys out there, but particularly for this matchup, it sounded like a really good idea. As long as Santi, is shooting the ball like that, it's the perfect. That's what the Grizzlies need their threes doing. It's sad that they have to bring the power forward to the three spot to get it done. But from John Conchars, from the Jake LaRabias, from the Zaire Williams, I think he went 6 of 15 from 3-point range in that game. Santi did.
Yeah,
that's kind of. Yeah, I mean, maybe not 15 3-point shots, but you need that type of aggressiveness from that small forward position. And Santi gave them that to kind of go with what Dez is doing and what, Jaren Jackson Jr. is doing. But as good as the Grizzlies played on that end, defensively, they stood out to me as well. With the large lineup, they were able to switch things more and do like that. But I will say this, especially with what we just said about the injury news, as much as I like this lineup, there are some new weaknesses that have been developed because of it that the Grizzlies will have to address. For one, in that Celtics game, 3 people scored in the first quarter. I don't have to tell you who they were. It was Desmond Bane, it was Jaren Jackson Jr., and it was Santi Aldama. Those were the only 3 players to score in the first quarter. I think pretty much if you add up the points, the Grizzlies had 100. Let's try to do some math on the spot right here, Joe. The Grizzlies had 100 points. Desmond Bane had 30. Okay. Santi Aldama had 28. Okay. Jaren Jackson Jr. had 17. That's 75, right?
58 plus 17.
That's 75.
I'm a social studies teacher. Oh, you have this predetermined. Okay, yeah. We'll go with 75.
75 points from 3 guys. The rest of your team gave you 25 points. That means 2 other starters on top of your entire bench. Matter of fact, no one off the bench scored more than 6 points, if I'm not mistaken. I think Vince Williams and there were a couple other guys that may have tied for 6 points. But Bismack Biyombo, you didn't really get much scoring there. You didn't really get much scoring from John Conchar. And you're probably not going to get much scoring from those guys. But so the point is, I like what this starting lineup does in terms of for the starters. But with no Luke, with no Derrick Rose will be back. And I think in that game against San Antonio, if we're talking about the weekend, he really gave them a burst. You could tell like they were just trying to limit his minutes, and he had it made up in his mind that like he was going to go hard in those 15 minutes. Had a couple nice, real quick crossovers, nice scoring bursts toward the end of the third quarter that helped push the Grizzlies into that fourth quarter run that we saw. So I think Derrick Rose is going to be really important off that bench, even more so important. And I know Joe himself wouldn't like to lean on Derrick Rose, but at this point, Joe, literally, I was watching that game, and there was not just one moment. There was probably in every single quarter, there was a time where the Grizzlies Summer League team from this past year or the year before was on the court. That includes Santi Aldama. But from the entire bench was made up of guys that played in the G League last season at some point. The entire Grizzlies league at some point. So the point is that depth. It's just like at this point, you need bench depth. You need bench scoring. I like what Vince Williams, gave them 6 points, 2 3-pointers. He's not going to be afraid to shoot the basketball. But between Jake LaRavia, David Roddy, Zaire Williams, someone's going to have to step up. And I'm not super confident in that happening right now. It was a luxury to be able to have Luke Kennard, Santi Aldama coming off the bench. And now you got one of those guys starting, one of those guys out for a couple of weeks. So the starting lineup has gotten stronger. But the bench, I think they just went from middle of the pack to probably maybe the weakest bench or one of the weakest benches in the league right now. Like somebody's got to step up over the next couple.
Yeah, definitely something to be concerned about. If this was the NBA of a few years ago where you didn't have so many two-way contracts and there were still 15 guys that were allowed to be on your roster, these Grizzlies would be out of luck with all the injuries they've had to deal with. All three of their two-way guys, Gilliard, Williams, and even Gigi Jackson. Gigi hasn't played as much, but he was up for the
might as well give him a chance at this point.
Sure. I mean, I'm with you, especially if that bench struggles. You got nobody else, maybe give the kids some run. I think that's fair. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we will talk about things that we're thankful for. Obviously, Memphis struggling at the moment, but there's still things to pause and have gratitude about. We'll talk about that to close out this episode of the show, since apparently the Grizzlies are playing some guy that used to play for the team in Wednesday's game. So we'll probably be focusing more on that in Wednesday's episode. But today we're going to do Grizz Giving here on Locked On Grizzlies. Before we get to that, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by the good folks over at PrizePicks. With the basketball season here, you can pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League. I think this is really cool, Damichael. It's a league created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, you've got Desmond Bane, obviously doing great things for the Memphis Grizzlies. Maybe you want to combine that with Patrick Mahomes. You can combine a 10.5, a combo of 3-pointers made and touchdown passes, something along those lines. You can also use PrizePicks for a reboot policy where entries stay in play even if one of the players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. PrizePicks is fun. You should definitely give it a shot. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, Damichael and I are being thankful on this Grizmas Eve. We'll talk about that next. Stay with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, one of your hosts of this wonderful podcast, joined by my co-host, Damichael Cole. He is the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. I am the Memphis Grizzlies columnist over at Bluff City Media. We are both very thankful that you are with us on this episode of the show, whether you're an everyday or this is your first time checking out the podcast, somewhere in between. Thank you so much for joining us. We've talked the negative of injury issues. We've talked the positive of this past weekend. Damichael, where do you land as we approach Thanksgiving? I know you're heading out to Houston here soon. You'll be doing the show for Wednesday. They're from Houston, Texas, getting ready for Dylan Brooks's first matchup with Memphis. Again, that's going to dominate our conversation on Wednesday, so it makes sense
tomorrow.
For you and I to be thankful today. We can celebrate Grizz Giving a couple days early here. What is something or some things that you are thankful for? It can be Grizzly specific, or it could just kind of be overall, partner, as you head into the holiday that everybody that celebrates it looks forward to because of family, food, and football.
Yeah. Well, I'm thankful for those things you just said for sure. Family, food, and football. I love
It's a
them
good
all.
day.
But
Thanksgiving's a good holiday.
yeah, for the Grizzlies' perspective, I'm going to talk about a certain player here. And if I don't get you excited off this segment, then I'm going to question your Grizzlies fandom here.
Ooh.
But I'm excited, and the Grizzlies should be thankful for Gregory Jackson.
Oh.
Joe, let me tell you what a scout, a talent evaluator that I really respect in this business told me the other day. He said that if GG Jackson was in the class of 2024, playing with, he's playing in the G League right now. All those G League Ignite guys are down there, projected top 10 picks. If he was in the class of 2024 right now, playing the way he's played with the G League, Memphis Hustle and whatnot, he would be the favorite to be the number one pick in the 2024 NBA draft.
Wow.
These aren't my words. This is the word of a respected talent evaluator who's been doing this a while. And you think about it, GG Jackson is 18 years old.
18 years old.
I know we've said it a lot, but he doesn't turn 19 until December. That's younger than a lot of the prospects right now that are playing on that Jig League Ignite team.
This dude was at South Carolina last year playing SEC basketball when he should have been getting ready for like AP testing.
Yeah, and he was the number one player ranked in his class. Yeah, and he was the number one player
in his class
before he reclassified. And clearly, just talking to the players, they're all very high on him. They just say, he's 18, he has to mature. And that's why the patience part of this is so important. And you know what? I think Grizzlies fans should be thankful for GG Jackson for this reason. Yes, this season has not gone the way you wanted it to. You expected the Grizzlies to be probably 8-5, 9-4, or whatever the case may be at this point. And they're 3-10. And they got 12 more games to go without Ja Morant. And who knows what type of chance they're going to have to make the play-in or the playoffs or whatever the case may be at that point. But guess what? You're not one of these teams that if you're having a bad season, you got to say, who's the top 5 projected players in the draft, the top 10 projected players in the draft? Some talent evaluators, as I've said, thinks GG Jackson is going to be better than all those dudes. You have a guy already in your system who's developing, who's already we know that the Hustle play a similar style of offense as the Grizzlies. Jason March and his staff, they all kind of are with the Grizzlies a lot, so they work extremely close in hand together. He already has a great relationship with the guys on the Grizzlies. So it's going to be a more seamless transition. He has the shot creation ability that me and Joe talk about 100 times over on this show. 6'9", great size. Be thankful for GG Jackson because in these dark days, there's your light at the end of the tunnel right there.
He gives off we always run the risk with comps, right? Comparisons. Yeah. He gives off like Paul George, Carmelo Anthony. Like he gives off some of those kinds of vibes. Yeah. And again, those aren't perfect comps. Talent, but the point is the talent. There is lottery talent there. And, I'm wrong every once in a while. I talked about how I would have liked to have seen them go with a more experienced player. And in the short term, an experienced player perhaps helps them more right now with their injury issues that they're currently dealing with. But to the credit of Zach Kleiman and that front office, they had the ability to identify that particular talent, and it's still early. But if that guy would be a top 5 player in this draft class, you got him in the second round, it's a massive steal for Memphis. I agree. I am thankful for the weirdness of the Memphis Grizzlies, whether it is a fan base who, whether it's on the spaces or whether it's on X, on social media, just the way that the fans interact with one another. It's not always sunshine and rainbows, and you do a much better job of staying out of that than I do, partner. But I'm thankful for a passionate and knowledgeable fan base. The city of Memphis and folks that follow the Grizzlies know basketball. That's important to understand. We interact with fans all the time that are a little bit more fan-driven and a little less, understanding of the game-driven. So I'm thankful for those Grizzlies fans, even though they are, not always kind to me. And I am also thankful for the weirdness of the Grizzlies when they have their entertainment between timeouts. I know, you know that I like pro wrestling. I loved the Undertaker tombstoning the turkey, Undertaker Grizz tombstoning the turkey that happened during a timeout, because I have the league pass where it shows the in-game entertainment for that purpose, because I love how they do that. I miss the FedEx Forum in-game shows and all the things. There was nothing when I lived in Memphis that I enjoyed more, this is true, than going to a Grizzlies game with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, or with my best friend. We had season tickets together. You know, obviously when I would cover for Grizzly Bear Blues in the past, walking down that road to Beale Street, like I'm sure you've done lots of times, Damichael, and you go up on FedEx Forum and you enter those doors. It's just one of the best experiences I've had in sports, is going and being around FedEx Forum and everybody that's associated with making that place a great place to go watch a basketball game. So I'm thankful for that. I miss it. I'm thankful for the ability to still watch it, to still cover it, to have a wonderful show that I do with Damichael Cole here on Locked On Grizzlies. I'm thankful for Nick and David Locke and all the folks that have invested in us and believe in us here on this show. Thankful for Bluff City Media, like I know Damichael's thankful for the commercial appeal. You know, it's a good time of year to just be happy and grateful for what you have. And even when it can be maddeningly frustrating, to be doing this for 10 years and to have folks, you know, value what I do enough to still be doing it, Damichael, and to be here with you, somebody who is going to be in the up and up in this business, to be part of your journey. You know, it's a lot of stuff to be thankful for.
Yeah, I'm super thankful for all those things that you just mentioned too. Of course, you know, the commercial appeal. You mentioned Nick and David here at Locked On Network with us, but I'm thankful for you too, Joe. I said it at the top of the show, but I think we got a good thing going here on Locked On Grizzlies. People are enjoying the show, and we're enjoying putting out the content. And we're gonna have we're gonna take a couple days off, you know, the Thanksgiving holidays, but I think we got a couple really good shows coming up, especially on tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow's show is going to be huge. So again, we did our Grizz giving early, like a Friendsgiving that you would do a few days before the holiday, because there's going to be a family reunion in Houston that Damichael is going to be there seeing firsthand. Very excited for our next episode of the show, Damichael. It's going to be Grizzlies Rockets. But again, Dillon Brooks is going to be the major focus for us. You know, he's a controversial figure in Grizzlies history. He shouldn't be, but we'll talk more about that. And we'll talk about Memphis, because there's going to be a basketball game that's played. And don't look now, but the Houston Rockets are one of the surprises early on this season. It's not going to be an easy showing for Memphis like maybe we thought it might be when the season began.
It's not. And these teams match up really well. I like Houston's defense. I mean, with Deshaun, I think Tate, that was the guy that you liked last year, right?
Yep.
Yeah. He is really good defensively. Dillon Brooks. I told you, Joe, I was there in the summer. I'm going to get pumped up talking about this. I'm trying to save some of it for tomorrow. I was there in the summer in Vegas. I was right behind them when Dillon Brooks and Desmond Bane were face-to-face, and Dillon's talking about how he's going to guard him, and Des is like, I'm getting past that easy and whatnot. So, look, we're about to see now, because Ja's not out. Ja's not here. So those two were going back and forth. We're about to see who's going to win that matchup. I'm excited to see it.
It's going to be a great game, and it's going to be a great episode of Locked On Grizzlies tomorrow. Make sure you're there with us every step of the way. Make sure you're checking out the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel Locked On has launched on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today, 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts like Damichael and myself on Locked On, plus our national shows that cover each and every league. Again, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe. Make sure that you are subscribed to Locked On Grizzlies wherever you get your podcasts, free and available. Make sure that you are liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, and, of course, subscribing, whether it's wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. Hopefully both. Continue to make Damichael and I part of your NBA and Memphis Grizzlies process. The process continues tomorrow when we break down Grizzlies Rockets, the return of Dillon Brooks. Obviously not in Memphis yet. That's coming. But the first time that Dillon Brooks lines up against the Memphis Grizzlies is going to be must-see TV, which makes this episode of Locked On Grizzlies can't miss. Make sure you're with us, Damichael, live from Houston, and myself on the next episode. See you then.